computer. Okay, and we're recording. Okay, today is Monday, April 1st, April Fool's Day 2019. This is session number 3 for OL650. Corey, Kale, Denise, and Lola, good evening. Welcome to week 5. Goal setting and performance management. These are some interesting topics today. I have the agenda on my screen. Hopefully each of you can see it. And so what I want to talk about at this time will be some of the notes I've taken from the week 3 writing assignment. This was your first major writing assignment for this class. And so I'm able to pull things out of this assignment that I may not have pulled from the other assignments, and that the others, for the most part, have been somewhat informal. This was supposed to be a real paper this time. And the idea was to pull some of the feedback from the first few samples that you submitted, whether they were discussion or the case studies or whatever, and then take that feedback and prepare for this one. I'll say that I found some papers that were absolutely perfect, and I found some that were not absolutely perfect. And so, and that's about normal. I'm almost of the belief that at least 1 or 2 of you reached out and spoke to someone who's taken my classes before and was able to get tips on what I look for in a writing sample. And as I've stated in week 1 and week 3, and I'll state again in week 5, this is a master's level course. And I really, truly believe that everyone in a master's level course should write at a certain level. And quite frankly, I feel as if I'm not doing my job unless I hold you to a certain standard. And that St. Mary's wants to keep its accreditation. I want to keep my job. And I want all of you to walk away passing this class knowing that you earned the grade that you received, not that Joseph or Dr. Joseph gave it to you. And so all of you will definitely earn it. So what I usually hear after the first major assignment is, Professor, I've never heard of passive voice before. And what I will say to you is, you can always tell when I'm grading papers, if you're looking out there on a regular basis, when I'm grading papers, you'll see that's when I'm posting most to the announcement area. Because once I see 1 or 2 of you making the same mistakes or having the same opportunities, I will find something on the internet that could possibly say it to you better than I can. And I post it out there for everyone to see. Passive voice always comes up. Academic tone, we've spoken about this before, but I think it's very, very important that we keep in mind that this is an institution of higher learning. We are writing academic papers, therefore there should be an academic tone. Requirements for a paragraph, and I'll say this again because I don't think it's getting through to some. A paragraph in APA standards has to be at least 3 sentences. At least 3. Okay? Citations. I found lots of examples of citations being applied improperly. I get the meaning of what the person is trying to do, but the citation is there when you're kind of sort of paraphrasing without losing the intent of the message that was written by someone else first. And so when you take that portion of the sentence that the person actually stated, and then you add your own portion to it, and then you put the citation at the very end, that implies that the person who you gave the credit to said all of it, when that's not the case. So if you talk about your company, Joe's Meat Shop, and then you quote something from your textbook in the same sentence, it's not likely that the author of the book said anything about Joe's Meat Shop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'll take silence as a yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Paraphrasing is very, 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 very important. Even when you're given credit for it, unless you're going to put quotes around it, it needs to be paraphrased. And then even when you put quotes around it, and I don't remember the exact part in the APA manual, but you kind of sort of, you don't want to do an entire page in quotes. I'm okay with probably 20 to 30 words. And that's only if you can't paraphrase it. I mean, put it in quotes and give the proper credit. But I strongly prefer, it's not me specifically, APA would suggest paraphrasing whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing more than changing the words without changing the meaning of the message and then giving credit. The reference page, this is one that gets most students. It's check the APA manual because there are some very, very small details that most of us miss from the reference page. And it's little things like which word should be capitalized, or how do you actually list a reference for a magazine versus a textbook versus a TED Talk. And the format is really, truly different for each of those. So just look at the APA manual and it will give it to you. And there are loads and loads and loads of APA help sites out there. I gave you some of them in the very, very first week. I also gave all of you handouts during the first week of I guess little cheat sheet handouts. And then when all else fails, years ago when I was a student, I used to use this thing called Son of a Citation Machine. And it's still active. So just go to Google, type in citation machine, APA, or son of a citation machine, APA, and it will load the information for you. All you have to do is enter, in some cases, all you have to do is put in the ISBN, and it will format it for you. Then all you have to do is copy and paste it. Some cases, you have to load the information in manually, but it will still format it for you properly, and will prevent that. Then, as always, worst case scenario, there's that old APA manual that most students don't open. But I promise you, you paid for it, you may as well use it. And some of you, I'll say this, whether you believe it or not today, some of you are going to go get your doctorate. And some of you are going to be just like me. I thought when I completed my master's degree, there was no way in anybody's world I want another degree. But something changed. And some of you will go through the same thing. And quite honestly, some of you write so well, you're ready for it now. And if you write well and enjoy doing research, why not? Okay? But overall, on the week 3 papers, great job. It was an absolute pleasure to read most of them. I mean, absolutely great work. Okay, let's move on. I'm running out of time here today. The week 4 assignment that I gave you guys. My mistake, guys. I wrote this course, and I listed the wrong questions. I listed 3 questions, which were from part 2, whereas I should have listed the questions from part 1 and part 2. Which would have given you more work to do, obviously, but that's what I should have done. And somehow in my haste to meet a deadline, I did not do so. So my mistake, my apologies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get to this tonight, but I'm running out of time, so I may not get to it tonight. But I'm going to go through and grade all of the assignments for the week 4 assignment, and all of you will get an A on that assignment because it's my mistake. It's no one else to blame here. Okay. Any questions about anything I've said so far? All right, good deal. Let me take a sip. Excuse me. Let's get to it. 3 things to keep in mind when you're setting goals. See, one of the most difficult things I do, I'm going to talk professional first. The most difficult time of my life as a leader of people is when I have to sit down and review the performance of the entire year as it was sent to me and as I remembered and as the notes I've taken and I read of the people who work in my organization. And so all the managers within my organization do the same thing with their people, and then everything bubbles up to me. And then the way that the system works at my primary job is we have a 9-block rating. Everyone has to get one of those 9-block ratings. And of course, that sounds really easy, but it's not that easy because we have to bell curve it. And if you think back to something that you may have heard in one of your other classes, whether it's in your bachelor's degree, your master's degree, you guys have heard of GE. And GE pretty much mastered the system some years ago where they basically said 10% of your organization should be dropped every year. Does that ring a bell with anyone?
It does.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, that's kind of sort of what my company does also. It's kind of sort of what some would call a forced ranking system. And there is some validity to that GE belief. that 10% of your organization is underperforming. I would say that if you've done that for a few years, and if you still have 10% of your organization underachieving, then you may not have done your job very well. Or you have such a large organization that there will always be 10% underachieving. So, but if you have an organization of, let's say, 100 people, I think it's very, very possible to reach a point where you've already weeded out your lower 10%, and you reach a point of where that exercise is no longer beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
So, does anyone on this call have to go through anything like this?
So I read Top Grading by Brad Smart, and if my memory serves me, he shoots for 90% A players. Mm-hmm. But his approach is to not remove that 10%, but maybe shift them horizontally or laterally in the program, mm-hmm. or in the company until they find a place where they're able to engage more, be more successful.
And that's a great thought. And that can be done during great times for that company. But what do you think happens when a company is struggling financially? And HR has the name of all of these employees who are in the bottom 10%.
That sounds like downsizing.
Sounds like down, exactly. And I'm going to get ahead of myself here on something as I'm talking instead of reading. When you look at your budget, your departmental budget, you're probably going to find that 90 to 95% of that budget is headcount, salaries, vacation, benefits. The other 10% will be travel, entertainment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But 90 to 95% of that budget is headcount. So that's your most expensive asset, which is also your most valuable asset. And if you're in a position where you need to cut finances or cut some costs, the fastest way to do it is to cut people. And that's what's usually done.
So
you all, go ahead, please, go ahead.
Would you say that if over 3 or 4 years, if you still have 10% underperforming, it would indicate that the recruitment process may be flawed as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're recruiting people who don't fit into your organization, there's a problem. Well, let me change that. If you're recruiting and then hiring people who don't fit into your organization, there's a problem. So again, HR has these numbers of your low 10%, or as we call them in my company, low-hanging fruit. And so when it's time to lay off, we go after those individuals who did not get the higher ratings, or the people who are on corrective action for whatever reason. The only catch to that is some departments are unionized, some departments are not unionized. And this is a sticking point for me personally and professionally. So sometimes your best performers are those individuals who are represented by the union, who are your least tenured employees. Mm-hmm. But the union rules would stipulate that those are the employees who would be laid off first. So how do you negotiate that one? My more tenured employees or my least productive employees, but union rules stipulate that I keep them. And as a leader, it's your job to create the most effective organization that you can create.
Okay. That sounds like a time to review the union bylaws.
And those and let's just say, for instance, the union contract comes up every 3 years or whatever number of years. Mm-hmm. But I do agree. I think it needs to be revisited. But sometimes you're stuck in a position where there's really not too much you can do except follow those rules. So now I'll get to some of these notes. I only took, I have about 11 pages of notes I took to prepare for today. I won't go through all 11 pages, so bear with me. So absolutely nobody I know today likes doing the annual performance review. even the high-performing employees can be demoralized by a rigid or arbitrary goal, or by one of those systems that I just spoke about, that 9-block rating system. What happens when you have a superstar who's being pitted against another superstar? You can only give one of them the highest rating. Certainly, you don't toss a coin. You simply want to make sure that you get you want to award or reward the great people or the great performers.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you can't. So when done correctly, goal setting can help improve employee engagement in a way that elevates performance and benefits everybody in the organization overall. So here are some steps that you may want to think of in an ideal world if you can. Involve the employees in the goal setting process from start to finish. So if you figure the goal or the purpose of the goal is to help the employee improve, naturally it makes sense to include them in the entire process. So when you get the employees to buy into this process and develop their short-term and long-term goals, it increases the likelihood that those goals will be achieved. So if managers and employees can jointly develop SMART goals, specific, measurable, actionable, results-oriented, and time-bound, doing so inspires commitment and allows the individuals a sense of ownership in achieving those goals. And sometimes it's even great when you create those stretch goals or stretch objectives to help push performance a bit more. Item number 2, or step number 2, link individual goals to business objectives. It is always the job of the highest level of executives to set a direction for the company. That direction for the company has to translate at the lowest level to actionable tasks or items by the people who do the actual work. And that's what middle management does. We translate those high-level objectives to actionable tasks, right? So here's a stat of companies who have effective performance management systems. 91% of those employees' goals are linked to business priorities. That makes all the sense in the world. I don't know what the other 9% are doing, but it makes sense to me that you want to link what people do to the overall objectives. So at Reacher, the explanation is simple. Employees would be more effective if they see how their individual goals fit into the big picture. My boss told me a story one time, and I'll try to make it short. I'm running out of time. He basically told me a story about a guy laying bricks, a bricklayer. Mm-hmm. Walked up to one guy and asked him, "What are you doing?" The guy says, "I'm laying bricks." Okay. Walked to the next guy and asked, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a wall." Went to the third guy and asked, "Well, what are you doing?" The guy said, "I'm building a church." So if you think about it, the guy building the church is probably more likely to be more effective because he understood what the end goal was supposed to be, versus the person who was simply laying bricks, or the one building a wall. So the more information, the better in this case. The third step is adapt goals in real time. Goals should never, ever be stagnant, because business isn't stagnant. One common mistake is when setting goals at the beginning of the year. A lot of people forget about those goals until the end of the year, hadn't revisited it one time. Mm-hmm. And that just doesn't work. So as business fluctuates throughout the year, you got to adjust those realities or those goals, or adjust the goals to those realities throughout the year. And when you fail to do so, it has a tendency to demotivate employees. And that's not to say that the goals should be moving targets, but that's to say that you've got to adjust to your environment. Any questions about any of that?
Mm-mm.
None here.
All right. And so this is a little duplicate bit here. And this is all about the power of aligning, what would I put in your papers here? the power of goal alignment. Let's assume that your company is like other companies, whereas the most valuable asset is those same people I spoke to you about earlier. So this means that productivity and profitability depends on you making sure all of your employees perform up to their best or full potential. The need to effectively leverage those employees is even more critical if your business is small or mid-sized, because a small or mid-sized firm simply can't compete with the large companies when it comes to technology, physical infrastructure, or financial resources. So in order for a small or mid-sized company to survive in today's market, the business has to find a way to be smarter, more productive, and more cohesive than those larger units. And so there are ways to accomplish this, obviously. And the ways, again, would be, excuse me, to make sure that you set those goals as closely to the overall company strategy as possible. So when you align those goals with the company's overall strategy, it increases the operating margin. So employees who clearly understand how their individual goals relate to those of the company naturally become more engaged. Just like the analogy I gave you before about the bricklayers or the brick masons. One was laying bricks, one was building a wall, one was building a cathedral. Once employees can see how they make a direct contribution to the company's success, they can focus on ways to work smarter. They can find ways to work smarter and more efficiently. And this boost in employee productivity naturally leads to increased operating margins and profitability for your company. Quicker execution of company strategies. Tighter goal alignments and goal visibility allow for quicker execution of company strategies by enabling your management team to move effectively to allocate labor resources across projects. And it's been stated that this also reduces employee turnover. The business value of having employees engaged in their work cannot be overestimated. As proof, a recent Gallup poll showed that companies with large numbers of dissatisfied workers experience greater absenteeism, lower productivity, and a higher turnover rate. We spoke about SMART goals just briefly earlier, and I believe you guys read about SMART goals already as well. Give that to stay highlighted. Leave it there. SMART, meaning specific. You guys know this, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Measurable. Go ahead, please.
Actionable.
Uh-huh. It needs to be attainable, right?
And timely.
Yeah, it has to be attainable. Mm-hmm. That one is so important. If you give goals that employees think are unrealistic, some of them will simply quit. I mean, I've seen this with my own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
If they can't reach it, why try? Measurable, obviously. I mean, no need to, if you can't track it, why even talk about it? Any questions about anything that we've discussed so far, guys?
No.
Nope. I rest. I asked the question I had.
I'm sorry, what was that, Kel?
Oh, I said I asked the questions that I had.
Okay. So I think my work week this week may be a little lighter than it was the previous 3 or 4 weeks, so I may get a chance to start grading papers earlier. I'll look at my calendar, and if I can start grading, obviously between meetings tomorrow, I'll start grading as quickly as possible, but my normal grading days are usually Wednesday and Thursday, so worst case scenario, everything should be graded by Thursday. Okay, I've lectured for 30 minutes, so any questions about anything? And our last, we have about 22 more minutes left, so my apologies for going over.
It's okay, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Corey, Denise, Lola, any questions?
I have none at this time.
Okay. You guys are making this
Nope.
easy for me. All right. So, as always, as Kel has found out on a few occasions, and I thank him, call me, and I will answer if you have any questions. I'll always respond to your emails within 24 hours. And if I don't, please feel free to call my cell phone. I will always answer it, guys.
Excellent.
I appreciate your time. Great paper so far. So let's keep doing it. Only 4 more weeks. 4 more weeks, and this will be over.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yay.
All right. Thank you so much. You all have a great evening.
Here's all.
Bye-bye.